morning. Buenos días a todos. Gracias por su participación sobre el tema del proyecto de desarrollo de mina aquí en México. Welcome, everybody. I'm pleased to be able to introduce what I think is an excellent panel of people and a very well-timed topic of discussion around the points that companies should prioritize when developing a project. And given the news over the past year about discoveries, about positive economics on projects all over Mexico, but as well some of the less than desirable outcomes of resource and grade reconciliation, mine development, I think this panel has a really good spread of experts and expertise in various avenues and facets of the industry. And so I'm happy to maybe give a couple minutes to each one of our panelists here to just give a quick introduction about themselves and the business that they're involved in here in Mexico, as well as just quickly touch on, what are some of the key points that companies can prioritize when developing a project, and how can they have a good relationship with the authorities around that? And maybe I'll turn it to Mr. Ken McLeod here with Sonora Gold.
Thank you, Doug. I'll give it my best shot here. My name is Ken McLeod. I'm the president and CEO of Sonora Gold. We're operating in Sonora State. And the focus for Sonora is to develop the Cerro Caliche project over the coming 12 to 18 months. We have been drilling for the past 3 years at Cerro Caliche. We've developed an initial resource. We believe now we have the makings of an initial mine plan in place. We are now embarking on the next phase, which is, of course, the approvals process, the environmental approval process, and we're ready to submit our MIA to SEMARNAT for its approval, and of course the change of land use permit as well. So the goal is do a double tier progress as we advance the project through 2022, and we're continuing to drill to expand the resource. And of course, that will have a positive impact on project economics and the lifespan of the project as well. And also we're proceeding, like I mentioned, with the submittal of the MIA, and with the expectation we would start construction in the latter part of this year. So the goal is to start loading the heap leach plant probably in the first quarter of 2023 and start revenues thereafter. So that's a focus for Sonora. The priorities for us would be simple. First of all, jurisdiction. It's everything. Mexico is a fine jurisdiction. We've had some setbacks over the past few years, but the overall goal, the overall underlying theme for Mexico was still, it is a very fine jurisdiction for mining companies to invest in. The next part is the break down the jurisdictions in Mexico. Well, I believe that Sonora State is one of the finest jurisdictions in the world for permitting a mining project. Sonora is reliant on the mining activities. It's reliant on the revenues from the gold production. And so as a result, we have a government, a new government actually in the state now, that is also very, very pro-mining. I'm very pleased to hear about that. We are very confident that the relationship between the mining companies and the government in Sonora State will continue to be strong and healthy. And the next item would be at the local level. The area around Cerro Caliche, when the nearest town being Magdalena. The Magdalena is, of course, the center of commerce, center of mining in the northwestern part of Sonora. It has a very, very large cadre of very experienced personnel in the mining sector, professionals and operators. And so we can rely on the wealth of expertise that is at the local level to develop the project and operate the project on a commercial basis. And then from a point of view of the environmental aspects, this is a disturbed area. We're surrounded by 3 mines. And so we have an infrastructure in place that it does not require anything except minor tweaking and minor additions to it. So what we believe very strongly that we have all the elements in order to make a very successful project in northern Sonora State. Thank you, Doug.
It's excellent. Yes, the jurisdiction, of course, is one of the most important in being in one of these principal mining centers with the history that you have in Sonora. and elsewhere in Mexico, in the country of Mexico, does help for that community engagement and that local level of understanding of surface disturbance. And I think that maybe turning it over to James with a very similar as one of the newest producers, or one of the newest producers here, but in a world-class historical district, taking a project that's quite well known but has been really relooked at. What have you, as a relatively new mining company in Mexico in a historical district, prioritized to get the success that you have had to date with the Guanajuato and El Cubo silver mines?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So I just want to kind of bend the conversation back to maybe the point at hand. Key points that our company and others need to prioritize in order to keep a project on track and moving forward. And thank you for the introduction. My name is James Anderson. I'm the chairman and CEO of Guanajuato Silver. And Doug, the project for the other listeners that you were so kind to mention is El Cubo. We've put the El Cubo mine and plant back into production over the last 6 or 8 months quite effectively. To your question, though, what is it that we have to prioritize? And I think that's one of the. I think it's a well-crafted question, because I think too often, certainly I'm a very linear thinker. I like to do thing 1 and then thing 2 and then thing 3. And I think if you look at Gantt charts that mining companies put together, we think in that fashion, right? We're all kind of scientific in that way. But I think that the priorities that we have to bring when we bring a mining project forward, whether it's from the exploration standpoint or whether you're starting to develop it or even moving it into production, really it's a multi-layered process. It's the multi-layered effect. And so you have to do a whole bunch of things early that maybe if you're a strict explorer at the beginning, you think, well, what do I have to talk to politicians for, or what do I have to be at town council meetings for? We're far too early for that. But I think the main ingredient, or one of the main ingredients into this soup that we have to put together in terms of local interaction, is we're never too early. We have to embrace the idea that we're part of the community and be very early and very often in terms of discussions with local stakeholders. If you show up too late, people anywhere, and certainly people in Mexico, can be, can rightly take the stance of, well, you've been here for a long time, we've never heard from you before. What do you want from us now? The other point that I'd like to make early in the conversation, when we talk about politics, and this is true in Canada, in the United States, and other Western countries, but it's also certainly very true in Mexico. When we talk about the political power, oftentimes we talk about things presidential, right? Things at the federal level. But in almost every case, it's the local politicians and it's local rules and regulations that impact us as homeowners, maybe, and wherever we live in the world. But it's also those people, the mayors, the local politicians, council workers. They have a far greater impact on how we interact with the community and on smoothly getting things done within the community. So those are my first thoughts. I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely, that's excellent. I think that will certainly come up again in some of the later themes of the conversation. But I think that actually turns it over quite well to Forbes, and maybe you could just give us a quick primer on Discovery Silver and what you're doing, because it's really that phase that you're at right now, that PEA level, just getting in the ground and understanding the system and what it means for the communities surrounding what is one of Mexico's most exciting development projects.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So my name's Forbes Gilmore, VP Corporate Development with Discovery Silver. We own the Cordero project. It's located in Chihuahua, so northern Mexico, similar to Sonora there. Cordero is one of the biggest undeveloped silver deposits globally, and we just put out a preliminary economic assessment fourth quarter last year, which showed an NPV well north of $1 billion, internal rate of return just shy of 40%. So if we're now looking forward from that PEA, we anticipate delivering a pre-feasibility study by the end of this year, and then a feasibility study at the end of next year, which would coincide with the construction decision at that point in time. So in terms of our sort of key priorities, absolutely, having that engagement with the sort of local government authorities, local communities, absolutely critical. I think it's a case of being a good corporate citizen. There's been a lot of acronyms thrown around in terms of CSR, ESG, EHS, whatnot. I think really all that boils down to is making sure you focus that all stakeholders benefit from taking the ore body where it is in the ground to basically extracting the mineral wealth that comes from that. And that sort of also leads into really having a very good understanding of the ore body. And the better understanding you have, that obviously means you can really tighten up the scope of what the project's going to look like in terms of processing, in terms of mining. And the more tightly defined that scope is, obviously that reduces the risk of cost overruns, it reduces the risk of schedule overruns. And from a permitting point of view, you're not going to be changing tact halfway through the build and then having to go back to the authorities to then sort of play around with the permitting that you were originally granted on at the time you started construction. So I think that's important. Mexico itself, there's a very open, transparent process for permitting. There's 3 key permits you have to get, and I think if you can tightly define the scope early, that will sort of save a lot of headaches down the road.
Certainly. And we've seen this time and time again, even though there is a clear path to permitting here, sometimes companies will look to jump through some hoops, and that never works out well for them. So I appreciate that scope of project is key for the understanding of the type of permit that you're going to want to go through, because it can be a costly overrun if not quickly defined and properly defined. And Neyran, I think probably Riverside has the broadest reach of all of us here in terms of jurisdictions that you're working in Mexico, and really that scope of size of asset as well. It's you've got development, you've got early stage projects. What are you prioritizing when you're developing your projects, and how can you as Riverside have a good relationship with this large scope of different various local government and regional or federal authorities?
Right. So we here at Riverside, as you know, we are a prospect generator in Mexico, and we like to emphasize on our number one asset, which is our team, our team of employees that work with us, and we work through them in pushing the permitting forward on our properties in Mexico, and we emphasize on keeping good relations with the community in the location that we are, for instance.
Absolutely. I think there's a really common theme there that yes. Early and consistent community engagement is Absolutely. Really a driver for success of the projects. And just following up on that, and I'll turn it quickly back over to Forbes. What are some of the challenges that you have faced when you've been developing your project, and how can you face them, and what sort of path can you take to maybe create a successful outcome?
Sure. So we're at the early stages of this process. We just put out the PEA, but if we're looking ahead to a potential construction decision next year, I suppose it comes down to 2 key risks that we really want to make sure we'll be addressing. And one of those is the financing risk, and the second of those is the execution risk. So the financing risk, I think you have to define a project that you can actually go out and finance, but not only finance, make sure that there's not an overly burdensome cost of capital that comes with the financing package. And so the way we've looked at our projects, we've actually staged the project in terms of its sizing. So we're starting off with a smaller size mill. It's still a decent sized mill at close to sort of 20,000 tonne a day. And then sort of year 4, year 5 is when we do the expansion. So that's really helped reduce our upfront capex. The study we just put out totaled that around 370 million. So a relatively palatable amount. And then secondly, as far as that execution risk goes, this also ties into the financing risk, because if you can help lower that execution risk, tightly define that scope, like I said, the lenders, the financiers will be much more confident in terms of their return on capital, and will be able to sort of take on lower returns, which ultimately benefits the company and benefits all the other stakeholders as well. So as that execution risk, I think keeping it simple, really knowing the ore body, knowing the project and how you're going to extract the metals out to, again, come back to what I was saying before, tightly define the scope. So it's all that groundwork ahead of time rather than sort of rushing in and trying to push something into production ahead of schedule, making sure you really sort of know the ore body, know the local landscape, know the metallurgy, so that you can really make sure that scope is going to be delivered upon as it's defined in the feasibility study when that's delivered.
Excellent. That phased approach looks like it's going to work out well for your team over at what we say is one of the largest development projects in Mexico and globally, silver development projects in Mexico and globally. Mehran, how about looking at it from the prospect generator side, where you do have these early stage assets, but also you do prep these projects up so that they can go into the hands of a joint venture partner, and they'll be drilling it out. So that early stage communication is vital because you are handing off the baton to another partner in development. What are the main challenges that you're facing when you're developing your projects at the early stage or ongoing, and how can you face them?
Right. Again, it comes back to hiring the right people for the job that's at hand, and to make sure that everything is done properly and through the processes that have been set forth before by the management. And saying that, we keep the communication lines open with our partners. We keep everything ready to go whenever they want to communicate with us. And that being said, we have a partnership with BHP on a copper asset that we have in Mexico, and then we plan on pushing that forward in 2022 as one of our assets in Mexico.
Excellent. So that key stakeholder communication comes up again and early and often, and having the right people doing it. And I'm sure, Kenneth, you'll agree, you do have a very, an advanced asset, and having a lot of stakeholder communication going through the MIA process right now, having that really effective environmental understanding and community organization understanding. But what other main challenges are you facing, or have you faced when developing your project, and how do you attack them, and how do you move them successfully?
The main challenge I see right now is taking a project through the financing phase, the project finance phase, based on the PEA. And we give a lot of thought to this aspect of it. And over the past year or so, we have been sounding out various financial institutions across the world, in fact, that are definitely interested in providing funding on a PEA level. Because if you look at the history of some of the projects in northern Mexico, Argonaut's projects, for example, some of them were put into production based strictly on a PEA. So when we did the metallurgical testing, we dealt with McClellan Laboratories out of Reno, and our instructions to them were, this is to be brought up to PFS or maybe even a feasibility study level, because we're not going to come back to you for additional testing following the delivery of the PEA. So we're comfortable right now that we have certainly a minimum PFS type of metallurgical test report. That came in at 74% recovery over a 90-day period. That's fine. The other aspect would be the going through the MIA process currently. Obviously there's a lot of cost attached to going through the MIA process. So having the project lenders on side in order to keep funding us as we're developing the engineering, the detailed engineering on the project, so we don't have to wait until the MIA is approved and then the project lending kicks in. We want to be able to expedite that almost now, actually, and so that we can start the detailed engineering. That is a challenge, obviously. And getting these project lenders on side is the challenge for us over the next 30 to 60 days. But we do have expressions of interest that are possibly even stronger than expressions. People that are working with us hand in hand in order to make this financing work. So that is the major challenge for us over the next few months. As far as environmental and other considerations at the local level, I think we've done a reasonably good job of covering the stakeholder consultations at the Cucurpe level, at the Magdalena level, and of course at the Hermosillo and Mexico City level. So I'm not quite as concerned about that aspect. So it all boils down right now to the appetite for project finance in the mining community and in the mining finance community. It's poor. It is definitely a challenge. So you have to stand out from the herd in order to make your voice heard. And it takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of risk, but we're prepared to do it. So, be prepared for a lot of disappointments as well. So for every 10 doors you knock on, you're going to get 9 rejects. So, just live with it and move on and focus on that one happy call that is supportive of you and move ahead with it.
Wonderful advice. I think the crowd would really appreciates that really great advice that both you, Kenneth, and Forbes put out there in understanding your ore body and then understanding your financiers and your funding capabilities and what you do with that. And the comfort that you can go to your partners in a financial level will also probably echo down to the community in that you can safely go speak at the local and then state and federal level saying we do have a strong understanding of our mineral system, the development potential, and what our funding capabilities are. So I'm going to go back, and it's actually great because Miran brought it up already, and so he's just going to be able to run on with this. How can third parties, bringing the right people into the process, how can third-party companies help avoid delays, and particularly on the regulatory side, comply with all regulations here in the local ejido level or community level, federal level? Just turn it over to you, Miran, as you do have a broad swath of exposure here in the country.
Sure. So third-party individuals have to have basically, to be honest with you, it all comes down to having boots on the ground and to having the right people for the right jobs and bringing the third-party individuals and doing the right type of work that you need them to do in order to push the projects forward, for instance.
So and at what point do you think it's is it from day one you start bringing a third-party consultant, or do you find that there's like a sweet spot to when you have a comfort level that you think that the project's at the right place to begin bringing in another partner or another third party?
Well, the project has to be signed off by your local team, your local team, and you have to be comfortable with the data that you have. And then once you have that data and you're comfortable with it, you bring in the third party in order to push the project forward until the next step.
Excellent. And so having that team sign off is your kind of your first barrier before you start to look to have that third party come in. James, how have third parties helped you at G Silver in El Cubo and the Guanajuato Mining District avoid delays in your development of underground mine assets and regulations?
Pardon me. So I guess we're in a slightly different position than some of the other speakers. We bought an asset and put it back into production within a 6-month period. With ongoing cash flow since October, as opposed to developing and drilling and exploring different assets. But I think that where the similarities are between our situation and the other panelists, having good third-party help in Mexico is necessary. I think we all have to rely on our legal counsels, on third-party environmental groups that do a whole bunch of work that maybe we either can't do as individual companies or that we choose to outsource. But I think, Doug, that another really important point is those excellent third-party groups, they're only as good as the interface with our own companies. And I think where, if I can be so bold as to brag about Guanajuato Silver for a moment, I mean, where we are a little bit different is that all of the boots on the ground here, all the decision makers in Guanajuato, they are Mexican nationals. 100% of the people who are running the operation in Guanajuato, starting with Hernan Dorado, his father Gerardo, all of our engineers, all of our environmental managers, all of our community relations people, they're all Mexican. And so when that conversation happens between our team and one of the third-party suppliers, well, it's a very direct, discussion, as opposed to having that expatriate layer, which so many of the other companies tend to have. So I throw that out there. I think that's one of the key reasons for our success in being able to move our project back into production so swiftly.
Certainly, and being in the district that you are, with the history that it has, and the importance of that district in Mexico,
Right.
It's just awesome to hear that you have that excellent interface between your national team and your third-party consultants. Forbes, having gone through a big PEA, on the back of that, there must have been a lot of third-party involvement. How has that helped you avoid delays or comply with regulations? And what do you think about what James was saying with respect to local teams?
No, I absolutely agree. And I think one great thing about Mexico is there's fantastic local talent there. Obviously, mining's been part of the economy there for hundreds of years. So that's a huge advantage, huge head start, to be able to tap into that. And I think it'd be silly not to. We've just gone through the process managing, call it technical consultants, third-party consultants who've been managing the technical side of things. So I think it's key choosing groups who have had a lot of hands-on experience in terms of the project that we're trying to define. And so we ended up choosing Asenco as our lead on the study. They've been very active, not only in Mexico, but globally, building similar process plants to what we envisage at our project as well. So I think making sure you're not only choosing the right consultants, but making sure their strengths align with the project as well is important. And then look, moving forward and moving away from the technical risks, I think smaller companies rely on these third-party consultants. We don't have in-house legal teams. We don't have in-house sort of government relations officers. But yeah, as we then look ahead to more the permitting side of things, absolutely, they're critical to the moving through that permitting process in a systematic fashion and making sure there aren't delays. And as sort of James pointed out as well, it's important choosing the right consultants who have the sort of proper understanding and proper connections within that whole permitting process in general within Mexico. We don't have the luxury of being one of the big gold mining companies where a lot of that expertise is in-house. So absolutely that local expertise is critical. And I think it's important to recognize that early on.
A lean, mean machine that you guys are driving forward, but really focus on understanding that diplomacy of the cultural interface between the third-party consultants and your in-house team, however large it ends up being. Kenneth, how about at Cerro Caliche and what's been happening over the last couple of years? What have you done with third parties, and how have you found that they're helping avoid delays, if any, or complying with regulations?
Well, I like some of the comments that Forbes came up with there, and we're mirroring a lot of his experience there in Mexico. We have a technical team and a field team that's all Mexican. And so when it came time for producing the PEA, the first item of business was what's going to be acceptable to the financiers. Somebody in New York or Geneva or Toronto, are they going to accept everything from a Mexican team? And the answer is yes and no. Obviously, the Mexican team has expertise. This team has been working on multiple mining projects over the years, but we brought in a team of Denim Engineering out of Ontario and Micon International out of the Toronto office, because they had worked on quite a few projects in northern Mexico, Lluvia de Oro, San Francisco, and others, and working with Argonaut and others as well. And so they had the local expertise. They had the ability to be able to almost think Mexican, but project the information to a financial institution in any part of the world. So that became a very acceptable means for us to go forward. But as we head towards the construction phase, obviously it's going to be 99% Mexican talent, because we do have the expertise. We have a mining engineer that has over 40 years experience in building mines and operating mines. And in fact, is operating his own personal mine as well, the Kiriego. So with that kind of expertise, you don't have to go too far. And so when it comes time to dealing with the government in Hermosillo, for example, we have essentially established relationships there at the governmental level that will stand us in good stead all the way through the construction and through the production phase. So I think that we've been able to combine the two, the best of both worlds, the best of the Mexican talent and the best of international talent. And so we've blended the two together, and there will be a continuing overlap between the two as we go through the MIA phase and we go through the construction phase. But once we're in production, this is going to be an all Mexican team.
Excellent. Certainly helps in the jurisdiction that you're in. Again, one of the principal mining centers of Mexico. And I really like what the word James used there, the interface between your, and Forbes echoed it in a different manner, but the interface between your highly knowledgeable, highly skilled, and very successful local team, and then the third-party consultants that are required for that investor understanding or that investor confidence. While you obviously and very demonstrably have had the success on the ground with the project, there is certainly the need to bring in third-party consultants to help give that level of confidence that the general public or the stakeholder and shareholder needs. I think that actually rolls in pretty well to the last question that we have surrounding ESG, environmental, social governance. And what are the most important aspects of ESG, this community relations, environmental relations, the key pillars for the large development PEA level projects? They're becoming more and more important as projects move forward. It's hard to be a company anymore and have success without having a strong ESG platform through your process, even from day one. We're seeing it across the board, having the community stakeholder uptake and understanding of what you're doing. So what are the most important ESG aspects to add to a mine development? Turn it to James.
Well, that's a big question these days, isn't it? And it's a very big question for small companies, because I think a lot of times, international markets look at us and they go, well, hey, you got a 3 or 4 letter symbol on the stock exchange, so therefore you must be a big company and you should have this and that, and you should have people in charge of this and people in charge of that. It's really tough for smaller companies to be able to address everything that everybody wants of us in the 21st century. And I think that part of the conversation, well, from my perspective, part of the conversation has to start from that, right? We expect a lot of these companies because they're public companies, rightly so. Mm-hmm. From our perspective, and I think again, but because of the size of our company, maybe it's tough to hit all of the ESG check marks right off the bat. From Guanajuato Silver's perspective, and I may be repeating myself a little bit, but one of the very important things from my standpoint about addressing some of that is having a whole bunch of relationship with the community itself. And I know on a call a couple of months ago, maybe somebody asked, well, so what's your relationship with the communities? And I kind of hesitated for a second, and I said, well, we don't have a relationship with the communities. We are the communities, right? And I think it's 40 or 50% of the people who are employed, of the 300 people who are employed in Guanajuato, are from the little towns just south of the city of Guanajuato that are our neighbors there. I think it's about 50 people who work for us who are graduates of the University of Guanajuato. So I think all of that is excellent. but I also concede it maybe doesn't address all of the various ESG components. And from our perspective, we understand that, and we have internal discussions about it. How fast we can get there and maintain, everything else that we need to maintain in a brand new silver and gold mining company, I'm not positive.
Well, and certainly in a financial regard, the window is not getting any larger for people who don't have an ESG platform when you do go to these various financial institutions, regardless of the size of your company. And we're seeing it that there is maybe a lack of guidance on what do we need to present and how do we need to present it, even though if those financiers were to go to a project, and you'd quickly understand if you did not have that social and environmental control on the project, then you're not going to have much success in communities.
Yeah, I mean, if I can jump in there for a second, I mean, the phrase that we often use is a social license.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think, and I hope that the capital markets will look at us and say, well, do they have a social license? Because that should be the most important thing, I think, to be able to do our business in these jurisdictions. And I think that phrase really should help to guide a lot of the ESG decisions that go forward. What do they think? What do the communities think? What do the people think on the ground regarding our, again, interface with how we're putting a project in production or how we are continuing our operations?
Absolutely.
Carry on from that point too, because I was going to use that exact term, social license. It is a challenge with this ESG framework because there's more than 20 frameworks, and some of them are very sort of proprietary in nature. And so your ability to meet all the different measures they have across all these frameworks is a huge challenge. But I think what it boils down to is having that social license on the ground, being open and transparent early on in the process, doing your social baseline, doing your environmental baseline, understanding what the risks are, being open in your communication early, and then certainly as you move forward, I think you've also got to keep in mind during the mine build, there's a lot of money the company's showing at the mine build. And so everyone's happy at that point in time, but you also got to realize after that, when things go into production, there is going to be a shift there as well. So it's an education process, but I think really important to build up that trust early on, and then also be sort of transparent on what the thing's going to look like down the road too.
I also feel, Forbes, that having been in the business now for the past 30 years or so and developing projects in Africa, such as the Congo and in Chile and so on and so forth, we've always practiced ESG in our own way. Otherwise, we would never be able to get a project off the ground. So I feel very strongly that good management would always prevail because if you were going into a community and imposing your will on that community, they're going to push back really hard. And it's always been the case, and you don't get your project approved. Now, I feel that ESG has introduced so much of a regulatory burden on mining companies that we are in danger of killing the goose that's laying the golden egg. They'll point to, oh, but you've got record profits this year. Well, what about the 5 or 6 years of losses that have preceded this banner year? So we're going to have a very, very tough time meeting all of the so-called aspects of this, not the social license aspect, but the ESG aspect. So I feel very strongly that with the financial institutions having gone full tilt into adopting the ESG profile, we're going to have a tougher time raising capital going forward, and that's going to impact all the way down to the local level. Because if you're not building mines, because of the fact that you've been strangled by ESG regulations, it's going to impact at the local level because you're not going to build a mine and there's no schools going to be built. So I feel very strongly that we got to get back into a balanced situation where we balance the benefits of ESG with the negative aspects of ESG.
Certainly streamlining the process, and we're seeing more platforms become available, but do they actually get the right information to the capital markets, and then does that trickle into the project financing level and then to the local communities, and how does it stop from stranglehold of project development. And how about at the more early stage level with Riverside and I'm not sure how many projects you have in Mexico in number, so you have a very probably wide-reaching ESG platform.
We do have a wide-reaching ESG platform, but the other guests mentioned, you have to be careful with the regulations. I mean, at the end of the day, there's so much you could do as a small company, but I believe that by keeping the lines of communications open with the community that you're engaging with, and letting them know that you're following to the best of your knowledge all ESG protocols that you can, things could be done smoothly going forward at an early stage.
Absolutely. So it sort of summarizes quite a broad reach of topics here, all around these key points that companies should prioritize developing a project. I welcome turning it over to the floor if anybody particularly had anything else that they wanted to add to this discussion. We've covered a lot of really, I think, palpable or tangible points here. Early consistent stakeholder communications, being a part of the community. I love that what James says, not just showing up and we are the community here. This is a direct, we're part of the blood of the area. We've talked about risk assessment, or at the ore body level risk assessment, and at the financial level risk assessment, and where this where that risk assessment can help you give your confidence to your financiers. But if there's anybody else that had anything else they wanted to talk on, I'd love to hear it. If not, maybe we could open this to the Q&A questions.
Bring on the questions, Doug.
Okay. So we got 3 or 4 questions here. I think I'll just I'll flip them over. All right, this one's for James. What factors in the company do you think are leading to its success?
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of factors in the company that have led to Guanajuato Silver's success, but I think paramount to that is what I've mentioned. So many of our partners, key personnel, are embedded in the Guanajuato community. You just can't replace that, right? So I think that's very important, and I think if you look at El Cubo and Penguico, which is our second mine in the area, I think we've been able to get more out of them in a shorter period of time than previous operators. And I think that I would love to put up my hand and take some responsibility for that. But I think the vast majority of the reason for that is because of our interaction within the community and because of our key Mexican stakeholders. That's
absolutely awesome to hear. I think it's an excellent model for all of us to follow operating here in Mexico. Forbes, what do you think is the best way to decide on an ESG approach, and how was your experience having decided that ESG approach last year, 2 years at Cordero?
Yeah, look, I think we've touched on some of these themes. But I think getting in early, we put out our inaugural ESG report out last year. So that's pretty early on in the process, given where the project's at. But that was formed around an environmental baseline and a social baseline. So we're now understanding the groundwork. We put that initial report out. So again, I think it's important how you approach it is understanding the landscape early on. And then as the project evolves and how taking into account what it's going to look like over the coming years, tailoring your ESG efforts in that regard. We are pretty fortunate where the project is. It's sparsely populated. There's not really much in the way of a local community. We are just north of Parral, and again, fortunate that that's a mining town. There was a silver deposit discovered there, I think in the 1500s, and there's an old head frame in the middle of town. So that certainly gives us a head start, but certainly you can't I think, relax and be comfortable moving forward. And initial ESG report last year, I think we'll continue to build on that, and it'll be more of a focus as we move towards a construction decision next year.
Certainly a common theme is this jurisdictional analysis on your ESG approach. What is the local community? How are you going to integrate? What does that look like for your process moving forward and your ESG platform moving forward? We've got one last question. I'm going to flip it to both Kenneth and Mehran. What are your expectations to the main challenges of the sector in 2022? Maybe we'll start with Kenneth.
Once again, it's probably ESG and the implementation of that at our dealings with the governmental level. Obviously, everybody's confused. What exactly are we supposed to be? What guidelines are we supposed to be adhering to? But they haven't been clearly defined when it comes down to essentially to the local level. But using best practices that we've been utilizing now for decades. We feel that the relationships we have at the local level are strong. We do intend to maintain these relationships. We intend to hire as many people at the local community, such as Kurupe and Magdalena, as possible. And there's a wealth of talent in these towns. And as far as being good stewards of the environment, obviously, it's in our best interest to do so. We are very cognizant of the fact that we're in an open pit heap leach facility environment. There are steps that we're taking to mitigate against visual distractions, and we're very fortunate that the ore is clean, with no manganese, no sulfides, and so it's easy to process. And so there's little or no likelihood of contaminating the water supply in the future. And so we from an environmental perspective, we believe we have what I would classify as the perfect project from my perspective. So the relationships at the local level and at the state level are very strong. We continue to maintain these relationships. And so I believe that that we will be able to meet those challenges as they arise.
That's excellent. And Mehran, how about to step it from the 50,000-foot view? What are the main challenges that you see, or your expectations regarding the main challenges of the mining sector in 2022, maybe in Mexico, maybe globally?
Right. I mean, the number one challenge with any mining company or of any sector in the mining world is the price of the commodity. And that's, unfortunately, it's out of our hands. It's in the hands of the financial markets. And I believe that the gold price is low and should go higher. But at the end of the day, it's like I said, it's out of our hands. It's the financial markets, the US dollar, real interest rates that set the price for the price of gold. And that could be, in my opinion, one of the main challenges ahead for 2022.
Excellent. That you're right, totally out of our hands, and has a real big influence on how we can get things done, our budgets, and what we can do as a project development scope. So unless there's anything else that anybody would like to open up to the floor, I think that wraps up our session here. We have really great group of people with a wide swath of expertise and scope of projects here in Mexico. So thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance in this presentation and this panel. And I hope you all keep a keen eye to our panelists' projects here in Mexico, as there's seems to be a lot of really quality work going on, specifically at the community engagement level and community interface level. And I hope that we can all model our projects around that.